Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this session. My name is Deborah Mack, and I'm here only to introduce a phenomenal colleague and friend. I'm very happy that you've attended this session. That is a presentation by Emily Zimmern. Emily served as executive director and president of the Levine Museum of the New South from 1995 to 2015. And under her leadership, the entire civic engagement and social life, I feel, of Charlotte completely was transformed. Charlotte, North Carolina. Her museum programs and her staff really attracted completely new audiences and national attention, and that of her colleagues, making the museum a place of civic dialogue, an advocacy site of inclusion in ways that were completely unprecedented, and an incubator for the community as well. The museum received numerous awards and accolades, including 2 Excellence in Exhibition Awards from the American Alliance of Museums, and was an inaugural participant in the Innovation Labs for Museums, a multi-year program. In 2006, the Institute of Museum and Library Services honored the Levine Museum with the National Award for Museum Service, and in presenting the award, and this was around, many of you, well, you may know, and some of you may not know, for the widely acclaimed Courage exhibit that was about the landmark Brown versus Board school desegregation case that originated in North Carolina. No. Yes. Sorry? You're right. No, that's right. And what I remember, and the exhibition really focused on North Carolina's role and the cases and the stories and the families involved in that larger multi-state case. That's right. And this national award for museum service was in part addressing that incubator project that just exponentially influenced everything else, not only for the Levine, but for Charlotte and actually for many of our institutions. And that was when I was able to really participate in their generosity with sharing all of this with colleagues. But that exhibit really toured, it toured nationally, and a smaller version of it traveled in South Africa. And Emily's leadership in the entire process of really transforming what that museum could be like, what the staffing would be like, what the museum should be in community and in the nation, was truly transformative and is really the model for many of us in the work that we continue to do. I could go on for more and more, but I won't, and please welcome and join me in welcoming Emily Zimmern.
Generous introduction. Everything we've accomplished is really Team Levine, and actually, I know there's some Levine Museum staff members. Stand up and give a wave. Thank you. I also want to thank Deborah. She has been just a great friend and supporter, as has her colleague Eduardo Diaz, director of the Latino Center at the Smithsonian. They've been great friends and mentors over the years, and I'm forever grateful. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about transformational demographic change, what sometimes we call at Levine Museum Nuevolution. And Nuevolution is creating a new America, a country that is more diverse than at any time in our country's history. In less than 30 years, there will be no racial or ethnic majority in the United States. The mostly white baby boom culture, of which I am one, that dominated the country in the last half of the 20th century, is giving way to a globalized, multiracial, multicultural mix. And so this afternoon, we're going to explore how do museums respond to those profound shifts. And this afternoon, I'm going to tell you about the response of one museum, Levine Museum of the New South, and its partners in Atlanta and Birmingham. For almost 5 years, we have worked together to engage our local Latino communities, a crucial part of that new America. Now, you may look at me and say, and I would agree, I'm a very unlikely guide to the new America. I grew up in Louisiana in the segregated South of the 1950s and 60s. And when I graduated from college in Tennessee in 1971, I knew exactly 2 Hispanic Americans and no Asian Americans. In 1982, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, a city that in the past 25 years has doubled in size and morphed from its former black and white racial landscape as newcomers from around the country and around the globe have arrived. Today, Charlotte is at the leading edge of demographic change. 1 in 8 residents was born outside the United States. Roughly half of our city's immigrants are Latino, the quarter from Asia. 13% of the population is now Latino. And in 2011, Charlotte became, for the first time in its history, a city in which people who identify as white were no longer the majority. The faces you see on the screen are Charlotte residents who were featured in a 2009 exhibit, Changing Places from Black and White to Technicolor. And on a personal note, when I retired last fall, one of the most gratifying moments was when a group of friends, leaders in Latino organizations, presented me with a certificate of appreciation and dubbed me an honorary Latina. I, along with my city and region, had traveled a great distance. Since 1990, cities, towns, and states across the country that historically had very few Latino residents have become magnets for newcomers from Mexico, Central America, South America. It's now estimated that by 2050, 1 in 3 Americans will be Hispanic. The southeastern U.S. has experienced the nation's fastest Hispanic growth. In many communities, it's really been hypergrowth. And many historians say that the emergence of Latinos in the South is the biggest story in Southern history since the Civil Rights Movement. Latinos are a part of a South that is changing for everyone. Southern society is being remade. The change is especially dramatic for a region which didn't experience the great waves of European immigration in the late 19th and early 20th century, and where the legacies of slavery and segregation continue to shape community life. Southern cities are now places where many cultures intersect in ever-changing patterns that generate both connection and tension. The signs you see there are from a stretch of Buford Highway in Atlanta. Some residents fear change, some celebrate it, some live in a bubble in their homogeneous communities, and some are simply befuddled. But everyone is trying to figure out, how do we move forward? And as we're reminded daily from the presidential campaign, we have a choice to make. Will our cities be welcoming places, creatively involving and supporting newcomers, or will our communities fragment into us versus them hostility? Which South do we want to be? With a vision of using history to build community, Levine Museum is committed to responding to demographic and cultural change in ways that are proactive and inclusive. Board and staff are committed to doing our part to build a cohesive, diverse community where all residents have the opportunity to participate fully. Thanks to an Innovation Lab for Museums grant in 2012, we were able to launch the Latino New South Learning Network, a collaborative initiative between Levine Museum and partners, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and the Atlanta History Center. We began a journey of discovery that continues to this day. So why the Latino New South Project? twofold purpose. One was to see if we could help our communities navigate this demographic change, especially see if we could use museum resources to help with immigrant integration. But the second was pure self-interest. We wanted to ensure that our institutions would continue to be relevant and viable in the future. And we knew that forging meaningful, sustainable relationships with our growing Latino communities was essential. We formed a 10-member innovation team made up of museum staff and community members from the 3 cities, along with an urban geographer from UNC Charlotte. And we decided to hold 2-day listening sessions in each city. We visited community centers, grocery stores, restaurants, a school, a radio station, a credit union, and lots of other places. We listened to Latino leaders, grassroots organizers, service providers who work with immigrants, and scholars who were just now writing this new history. We listened in Spanish and English. We listened to everyone, from individuals who were undocumented, people living in the shadows, to teachers, entrepreneurs, and elected officials. We quickly realized that there was no such thing as the, quote, Latino community. We synthesized what we had heard and developed a set of 7 insights that would guide our work with Latino partners going forward. I'll let you have a minute to read those over. That was an early first draft. Oh, I'm sorry. Then I was trying to pause, but anyway. Latinos are here to stay. Latinos come from many countries and cultures. Biculturalism is growing. Extended families are important. Bridging is essential. Language is a powerful symbol. Becoming documented is difficult, often impossible. And I could talk about each one of those for the rest of the afternoon, but those were our guiding insights that we had learned. And as a direct result of participation in the Learning Network, our 3 museums extended and strengthened our connections with our local Latino communities, created more relevant programs, and contributed to our city's understanding of what it is needed to be a welcoming community. Each institution utilized findings to shape its programming and practice according to its mission and community context. And this is, for those of you who can't see, this is Birmingham's. They really expanded their civil rights work and incorporated immigrant perspectives and Latino perspectives along with African Americans, invited immigrant activists to the museum to learn lessons from the African American freedom struggle, and veteran civil rights activists actually mentored immigration activists. It was really quite amazing. At Levine Museum of the New South, we have strived to embed what we learned from Latino New South into our institution's DNA, incorporating Latino perspectives and voices into ongoing programming and signature events. We've also hosted exhibits that tell stories that haven't often been told in Southern history museums. For example, you can't see it, but there was one called the Magic Kite exhibit, and it was community curated by a Mexican-American artist. And she worked with children and teens who had a family member who had been deported. And they made a kite, and the tail of the kite was from a piece of clothing from the family member who had been deported. And beside each kite, there was an amazing statement by that child. And literally, we had visitors who would walk by and tears would come to their eyes. These were the kinds of stories behind the headlines, behind the statistics. We hired a Latino New South coordinator. We made it a permanent position. We hired a native Spanish speaker for our guest services. We did all sorts of cross-cultural programming, particularly between African Americans and Latinos. They're up there as a book club among Latino and African American teens, and they read The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson and talked about the parallel experiences. Based on our collective efforts, Levine Museum decided to focus its next major exhibition project on the emergence of Latinos in the South. It would be informed by the 7 insights and draw examples from our 3 states. Atlanta and Birmingham would continue as active partners, and the Learning Network continued beyond the Innovation Lab. During the 2 years of exhibition development, we continued to listen, both with groups that we had met with previously and new groups. And an initial concept was called Creating Home, and we went out to hear what the community thought of it. And they thought it was awful. They said, that's the lamest idea we've ever heard, especially millennials. They said, what are you talking about? And overall, the feedback was just, if that's all you're gonna do, don't do it. It's oversimplified, it's simplistic. If you're not gonna embrace the complexity, and if you're not gonna talk about the tough stuff, don't even bother. Some of the kinds of comments we heard from working class participants, both documented and undocumented, urged the museum to help the broader community understand their struggles. They said things like, we're here, we're somebody, we want to raise our families, don't demonize us. Professionals and business owners wanted their contributions and achievements recognized. Many wanted the museum to underscore the diversity within the Latino community. For many, a repeated refrain was, we're not all Mexicans. A teacher reported moving to Charlotte 20 years ago and being asked by a bank teller, where are you from? She answered, Puerto Rico. The teller asked her again, where in Mexico is Puerto Rico? So listening to the community caused us to move in a different direction. Rather than simplifying the story, we chose to embrace the complexity of transformational change. How are Latinos shaping the South, and how is the South shaping Latinos? What does it mean to be Latino in this newest New South? Facilitated by expert, experienced developer Darcy Foreman, with whom we've worked on all those projects that Deborah mentioned, and outside a collaborative, multicultural team of Levine Museum staff members and outside consultants guided exhibit development and design with input from museum staff in Atlanta and Birmingham. We even crowdsourced the title and the logo of the exhibit. I don't remember exactly, but literally hundreds of people weighed in, Latino and non-Latino. And what you see was the preferred choice. People really like the design, the dynamism, the diversity, the explosive energy. And they also like the totally made-up, mash-up Spanglish word Nuevolution. That blending of Spanish and English. It resonated and pointed to the mashup of cultures, beliefs, and practices that they were encountering every day in their lives, and it also pointed to the mashups that we would be talking about in the exhibit. And they also thought that the exclamation points kind of added a hint of revolution, a little revolutionary change. So last fall, Levine Museum launched its most ambitious exhibition project to date. And for a Southern History Museum, it broke new ground in a number of ways. First of all, it was a bilingual exhibit that wasn't only translated, we'd done that before, but all the content was transadapted into culturally appropriate communications in Spanish. Also, we incorporated the work of 14 Latino artists who, in a variety of media from across the South, and that really enriched the experience. And the whole project, the whole exhibit was designed as a platform for participation. And the organizing principle of the exhibit was actually a Spanish concept, encuentros. And as I understand it, I'm not a Spanish speaker, although that's on my bucket list, or not bucket list, what I'm working on. It has multi-layered meanings, encountering, discovering, coming together. And it connotes a positive sense of connection and embracing of difference. And there were many examples of encuentros, but there were also examples of disencuentros, the negative experiences of tension, distrust, misunderstanding. The exhibit raises a broad range of questions. How are people grappling with difficult issues such as identity, belonging, and exclusion? Amidst the swirl of demographic and cultural change, who is a Southerner? Who is American? The heart of the exhibit is a section entitled Our Encuentros, 17 modules with embedded video stories surrounded by images, art, and artifacts. These modules showcase the personal stories of people, Latino and non-Latino, from across the South telling their own stories. These are the stories, again, behind the statistics, the stories behind the headlines. And as we had heard, there are all kinds of stories. There are stories of struggle. There are still children working in tobacco fields today. There are stories of great achievement. Coach Ron Rivera, go Carolina Panthers, is a very proud Latino and talks about that and his notion of what family means and how he imparts it with the team. There are also stories of celebration, dance, music, religious inclusion. The produced video pieces were selected from more than 60 interviews taped by professional filmmaker Rodrigo Dorfman during 18 months of engaging with communities, Latino and non-Latino, across the South. Visitors can also add their own stories in a video story kiosk, and along with tweets, both of those are incorporated back in 2 places in the exhibit. So the exhibit is always being refreshed with new content, and that's critically important because the exhibit's going to be up for 13 months in Charlotte, and then in 2017 travel to Birmingham, and in 2018 to Atlanta. The new format is creating a new participatory model to build community, integrating history, first-person narratives, social media outreach, and personal interactives. So in summary, this exhibit illuminates connections and tensions and encapsulates complexity. It explodes with sights and sounds and energy and ideas that reflect this whole swirl of change occurring in the newest New South. And I have to be really honest, before it was about to open, I was really worried because I thought it could be just one cacophony, one jumble. I mean, how in the world? This is sort of antithetical to everything I ever knew about exhibits. You're supposed to distill and have the iconic story, or if you overwhelm people, they won't get it. Well, amazingly, it wasn't one hot mess. It actually works. Visitor feedback from Latinos and non-Latinos has been overwhelmingly positive. And what's been especially gratifying to me is seeing the millennials and teenagers. And an observation on the community day, which was just swirling with people as we opened. And I talked to some teens, and for them it wasn't overwhelming at all. They're used to dealing with just all kinds of inputs, and they select what it is they want to engage with. So for them, instead of an old gray hair, it worked, it made perfect sense. And then just 2 days ago, I received from a museum staff member a review of the exhibit in the current issue of the Public Historian, the May 2016 edition. And it was just incredibly affirming, and I'm sorry I'm taking too long, but I want to read you the excerpt of what the reviewer had to say. This exhibit is a thought-provoking journey into a beautiful, funny, sad, disappointing, and enraging world where Latinos in unexpected ways are transforming a biracial region unaccustomed to large-scale immigration. What elevates this exhibit is its embrace of different audiences, youth and elderly, Latino and non-Latino, male and female, citizens and undocumented immigrants. The exhibit organizers succeed in melding all of this into a coherent expression of the complex Latino experience in the New South. So that's a major shout out to the exhibit team. I always say if I did the exhibits, nobody would come. So we also at Levine Museum want our exhibits to be catalysts, and I just want to, the catalyst for cultural programming. We've had, you know, dance and music and food, which are always great cultural connectors. We also have programs on policy issues like healthcare and education. We also host dialogues where visitors see the exhibit and then in a safe environment are able to talk about contentious issues. And because of all this work at Levine Museum of the New South around these issues, museum staff members are asked to participate in broader civic initiatives. I know it's kind of hard to believe, it's hard for me to believe. I was invited to be co-chair of the City of Charlotte's Immigrant Integration Task Force. And the reason is they like the methodology. And we used Innovation Lab listening sessions and questions to go out and secure feedback from immigrant groups across the community. And the project is having an impact beyond the museum field. Last month I spoke at the National Convening of Welcoming America in Atlanta, and there were people from across the country and from Germany and from Australia who are all dealing with migrant crisis, and how can we use arts and culture, how can we leverage arts and culture to help in the work of welcoming. Last fall, the Aspen Institute brought 10 journalists from around the country to see the exhibit and spend 3 days learning about the experience of Latinos in the South. So I'm going to end where I began, back with New Evolution and the transformational demographic change that we're experiencing. And if I can find my last page, things have gotten a bit muddled up here over the computer. Transformational demographic change, what we at Levine often call New Evolution, is creating a new America that is more diverse than at any time in our country's history. How will museums adapt to our demographic destiny? We've heard the answer of our 3 museums. We responded to the new demographics by trying out new approaches to authentically engage with new communities. With humility, we asked questions, we listened, we responded. As a result, we developed new relationships and found new relevance. I believe each of our institutions will continue this iterative process that has brought such benefits. I hope our story is helpful as you think about your museum and your community. Given the theme of the annual meeting, I ask you to consider the following questions. What is your museum's responsibility to engage diverse communities? How will you use your power as a cultural connector? How will you exercise your influence to benefit the new America? Based on our exploration, I urge you to embrace the transformational change of New Evolution and find the answers that work for you and your institution and your community. The time is now. Andale.